I knew something reeked the second I opened the incident log and found three separate no-spill reports filed on a day when two employees from the site were treated for chemical burns. That kind of math doesn't lie. It just gets buried under a few thousand lines of spreadsheet bullshit. They'd even timestamped a clean audit 37 minutes after the local fire department clocked a hazardous materials call on the same property. My job was supposed to be dry, procedural, integration compliance, match our standards with the new acquisitions policies. But what I found wasn't a policy gap, it was a damn cover-up hiding in plain sight. I took a long drag of my office coffee, which tasted like printer ink with a hint of lemon, and stared at the blinking cursor in our internal audit form. This wasn't the first time someone tried to duct tape a liability and hope no one looked too hard. But the arrogance of it, submitting fake safety audits to a public company's database, it was either desperation or stupidity, probably both. By the way, if you're hearing this and you haven't subscribed yet, it helps our team more than you know. We're just trying to keep these stories alive. Hit the button, toss a like our way, it lets us keep digging and telling them right. Anyway, the site was in Texas, recently acquired by Alvinic Group as part of some bright idea to diversify assets into chemical logistics, which is rich coming from a company that thought a compliance manual was optional reading material. I'd been at Alvinic almost 12 years by then, long enough to know how to spot the difference between corner cutting and willful negligence. And what I saw in that integration folder, that wasn't some oversight. That was systemic. I didn't panic. That's not what I do. I document, I double check. I build timelines, not headlines. So I pulled the last 6 months of site logs, worker incident reports, chemical disposal manifests, everything I could get that hadn't been scrubbed or overwritten by whatever fresh intern they had running inventory. The same names kept popping up. A regional ops director named Kellen Grover, a safety lead who hadn't signed a single physical inspection, and a compliance officer at the acquired company who'd quietly resigned 2 days after the merger. I filed a preliminary concern with my manager. Standard internal protocol. Tagged it Integration Risk, Category 2. Nothing inflammatory, just enough to flag it and escalate without raising alarms. His reply? We'll keep it in the weekly review. That was code for "We're too busy," which was Alvinic's unofficial mission statement ever since Ivy Carmichael took over HR. Now, let me be clear. I didn't know yet just how far Ivy's fingerprints would be all over this. At that point, I just thought she was another clueless nepotism case pretending her influencer-level LinkedIn posts counted as leadership. Her photo was on every slide deck, all pearls and veneers, but no substance. Her idea of employee engagement was mandating everyone wear purple on Fridays and calling it culture sync. Still, I followed the handbook. I built out the report fully. 51 pages with supporting documentation, 6 linked appendices, internal comms from the site manager talking about bending rules for quarterly margins, and a disposal log that literally had a line blacked out with Sharpie and scanned back in. I used the official whistleblower hotline, not because I was scared, because I wanted the process to work. That's the tragic part. I believed, stupidly, that the structure would protect the truth. That doing the right thing the right way still mattered. The moment I hit submit, I felt something shift, like I'd just thrown a rock into a well and heard no splash, just silence. 4 days later, I got the reply. Case 1147C, closed. Marked, drama, not actionable. That was it. No follow-up questions, no clarification, just a subject line and a signature. Ivy Carmichael, VP of People and Culture. No review, no audit, nothing. She dismissed the entire thing like it was an episode recap of some Bravo show she didn't like. The word drama was all caps, like she wanted it to sting. Or maybe that was just her brand. I stared at that email for 10 straight minutes, not moving, not blinking. The cursor hovered over reply, but I didn't click. I just saved the email, printed it, slid it into a file folder labeled Fallout, and quietly began what would become the most measured act of rebellion I've ever committed. I didn't argue, I didn't push back, I didn't storm anyone's office or leak to the press. I did something much simpler. I copied the entire report, cleaned it up for an external audience, and attached the same exact case ID Ivy had closed. Then I sent it, just once, to a federal regulatory inbox listed on the back of our own ethics handbook. And I waited. The real problem didn't start with the spill. It started with the cover-up I wasn't supposed to find. A Wednesday morning review, nothing special, just sifting through transfer logs between the old site database and our compliance integration system. I'd seen worse. But then I noticed it. A series of auto-approved safety audits logged within 60 seconds of one another, same IP address, same digital signature, and all of them time-stamped during an hours-long systems outage that, according to IT logs, had disconnected the entire South facility from the server. That's when the knot in my stomach started. It wasn't fear yet, just that slow, crawling dread you get when you realize something's off and nobody else sees it. Or worse, they saw it and decided not to care. I started cross-referencing the audits with facility shift reports. On July 3rd, the log said no anomalies, but 2 hazmat suits were checked out. On August 11th, the site allegedly passed a random waste inspection with no violations, but the camera feeds were wiped, archived under a corrupted file name that just happened to match a discontinued disposal route. And September? Well, September was a goddamn party. A leak was flagged on Sensor 6B, but the official report claimed the alarm was malfunctioning. Never mind that Sensor 6B was newly replaced in August. Brand new, factory certified. You don't malfunction your way through a 2-hour ammonia spike without someone choosing to look away. I filed 3 formal notes in the project tracker, all marked pending, all untouched for over 2 weeks. Every Friday, I sat through status updates while junior execs flaunted cost savings like we were coupon clipping our way to operational excellence. They joked about how the new site practically ran itself. I bit my tongue until it bled, because when a site runs itself, what it really means is someone already decided your standards are negotiable, safety too. Then I stumbled on a buried attachment, a PDF embedded inside a compressed archive labeled Temp Reports Q2. Inside, scanned sheets, real logs, pen-written disposal entries that never made it into the official system. One stood out, May 19th, a manifest for Class D waste manually signed, with a disposal time that didn't line up with any documented courier pickup. That was bad. Class D is restricted, traceable. If mishandled, it's not just a fine, it's jail time. The report was stamped, copy only, do not upload. That was the moment I knew. Someone was falsifying records to hide improper chemical disposals. I didn't sleep that night. I reread every policy. I triple-checked internal protocols. I even reviewed Alvinic's ethics disclosure training from onboarding, just to remind myself that once upon a time, the company claimed to care. It was all right there in our handbook. Employees have a duty to report suspected violations through official protected channels. No retaliation, no exceptions. I wasn't afraid for myself, not exactly. I was afraid of what would happen if I said nothing. So I did what the policy said. I documented every finding, created a secure log of screenshots, time entries, and metadata. I traced every phony audit back to the originating user ID, which, surprise, was linked to a temporary admin account used during acquisition. That account had elevated privileges and no assigned owner, like someone set up a ghost to do the dirty work and vanish before we got around to monthly credential cleanup. I compiled everything into a formal internal whistleblower report. Structured, clear, no finger-pointing, just facts. The summary alone ran 6 pages. It included 8 attachments, each cross-referenced against internal safety logs, and concluded with this line: if these records are genuine, our systems were compromised. If they are false, we have knowingly certified invalid safety data to regulatory bodies. Either way, this is a compliance emergency. I sat with it for hours before clicking submit. I stared at the button like it had teeth. Because once I sent it, it was real. It would go into the system, it would get a case number, and it would either be handled or buried. I hit send at 3:14 a.m. My cat blinked at me from across the room like even he wasn't sure what I'd just done. By noon the next day, I checked the system. The case had been assigned. Case 147C, Internal Whistleblower Q, and it had been routed, of course, to Ivy Carmichael's office. I closed the screen, told myself to give it time. Told myself someone would escalate it. But deep down, I already knew it was never going to see daylight, not unless I found another way. The email came in on a Tuesday afternoon, time-stamped 2:12 p.m. Subject line, Case 1047C Final Status. I was halfway through annotating an appendix on waste stream variance reports when it popped up. My heart didn't race. My stomach didn't drop. Just a kind of stillness, the kind you get before a storm you already knew was coming. I clicked, read once, then again. Hi, Evan. Thanks for your concern. After internal review, case 1 in 47C has been marked as drama, not actionable at this time. Appreciate your passion for the process. Ivy Carmichael, VP, People and Culture, Naiwier Alvenic. The goddamn smiley face. That's what did it. Not the dismissal, not the word drama in all caps like I was pitching a script instead of flagging a federal liability. It was the emoji sheen of someone too rich, too sheltered, too LinkedIn certified to grasp the consequences of her own apathy. I stared at the screen for a full minute before I even moved the mouse. Not because I didn't expect it, but because I did. Ivy had been installed in HR 6 months prior. One day she was tagging beach yoga posts on Instagram. The next she was holding town halls about emotional productivity and emailing mandatory vision board templates to staff. Her only credential was being David Carmichael's daughter, the CEO, the king of Alvenic, the man who'd once told a compliance director in a board meeting, "Your job is to make things legal, not to stop them." And now his daughter was the gatekeeper for whistleblower reports. It was always going to go this way. Still, I opened the email settings, forwarded the message to myself, saved it as a PDF, printed a hard copy, and filed it behind a photo of my niece on my bookshelf. Because if there's one thing no audit ever checks, it's family pictures. Then I opened the case tracker and looked at the closed ticket. The system let you leave internal comments, even after closure. I hovered for a moment over the text box, typed a single word, acknowledged, then deleted it. I didn't write back, I didn't escalate, I didn't walk into HR with a folder under my arm and a righteous speech about ethics. That's what she wanted, to make it messy, to make me loud so she could point to the volume and not the content. So I stayed quiet, but I did one thing. I took that same report, the real one, the one with cross-referenced logs and time-stamped anomalies and a disposal manifest that might have broken 3 federal codes, and I stripped it of internal language. I removed anything protected under Alvenic's confidentiality umbrella. I replaced names with roles, cleaned up formatting, embedded links to publicly available EPA waste handling guidelines, just to be polite. Then I rewrote the summary, not with rage, with precision. Clinical, careful, quiet. And at the top of that version, I added a single line in bold. Originally submitted to Alvenic Group Whistleblower Hotline, case ID WHEN47C, marked drama, not actionable. I saved it. I didn't send it, not yet. Instead, I went back to work, joined the compliance sync like nothing happened, took notes on inventory flags, replied to an email about onboarding packets for the new junior analyst Ivy had just hired, a lifestyle influencer who once filmed a makeup tutorial titled, "What Even is OSHA?" The next few days moved in slow motion. Nothing changed on the outside. Ivy posted an Instagram story from the company rooftop, sipping something lavender-colored out of a mason jar with the caption, "Scaling joy, not just margins." I watched, and I waited. Because here's the thing Ivy never understood. You can close a ticket in your inbox, but not in mine. There's a moment when silence stops feeling passive and starts feeling tactical. That's where I lived for the next 2 weeks. I didn't pace. I didn't rehearse justifications in the mirror. I didn't even tell anyone, not my sister, not my old mentor from school, not the one friend at Alvenic who still brought his own lunch and didn't care about rooftop mixers. Because this wasn't about me. It was about the report. The real one. The one Ivy didn't read. I opened a secure browser on my personal machine, offline, no shared network, and navigated to the EPA's Hazardous Material Incident Reporting portal. They make it look sterile, mechanical, boring by design. But hidden beneath the drop-down menus and form fields is the one thing people like Ivy always underestimate, someone who's watching. I uploaded the full report. No flair, no commentary, just attachments, charts, screenshots, and cross-referenced links. In the summary box, I wrote, "This report concerns potential falsification of safety audits related to Class D chemical handling and disposal at the Westover facility, acquired by Alvenic Group Q2 of this year. Documentation was submitted internally on date and marked drama, not actionable by HR. Internal case ID 1047C. Please see Appendices A through G for evidence. No accusations, no demands, just data tied in a bow with their own damn case number." I clicked submit at 11:38 p.m. on a Thursday, while Ivy posted a LinkedIn carousel about modern HR leadership, from what looked like a wine bar She quoted Brené Brown. She used the phrase emotional scaffolding 3 times. One of the photos showed her on a rooftop again, laughing with an arm around the junior safety manager whose signature had appeared, mysteriously and repeatedly, on forged logs in my report. I didn't read the full post. I just closed the tab. The next morning, I brewed coffee, sat at my desk, and wrote an entirely normal status update for the integration team. Action items for facility intake this week include cross-verification of manifests and alignment of retention protocols with central documentation policy. That was it. Boring. Purposefully boring. I'd learned over the years that the best hiding place for the truth is right out in the open, dressed in compliance language no one wants to read. The days passed. I watched Ivy announce a Wellness Week initiative, complete with essential oils and branded yoga mats. She even hired a local Instagram nutritionist to do a lunchtime seminar on detoxing your workflow. Meanwhile, I kept my head down. Rebuilt spreadsheets, nodded in meetings, kept logging anomalies but didn't submit any more tickets. I knew what happened to noisemakers here. Ivy didn't squash problems. She rebranded them, turned safety into vibe disruption, made accountability feel toxic. You couldn't fight that head on. You had to wait. 3 weeks after the submission, I got a nondescript email from a .gov address. It didn't say much, just a confirmation that the report had been received and was under standard preliminary review. That meant they'd read it, at least once. Maybe just scanned, maybe more. Either way, the file wasn't lost in some inbox void. It was moving now, slowly but inevitably, so I waited. No whistleblower op-ed, no secret Reddit posts, no TikTok where I said, "You won't believe what my company did." Just quiet. Intentional, watchful quiet. Because I didn't need to yell, not when the truth was printed in black and white, under their own header, with a case ID that couldn't be erased. 1047C. Every day that passed, Ivy looked more confident. She bounced through the halls in kitten heels and faux gratitude platitudes, planning Alvanik Fest and prepping a speaking panel for a conference she'd never worked hard enough to deserve. But I didn't need her to believe me. I just needed the regulator to call. It was a Tuesday again. They say nothing good ever comes on a Tuesday, and I'm inclined to believe them. The email subject line was sterile. Follow-up request, submission reference number 1047C. I clicked without hesitation. The body of the message was brief, professional. A federal analyst from the EPA's Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance thanked me for my prior documentation and requested clarification on 3 appendices, along with any additional materials I felt may support or expand the original disclosure. There was no signature flourish, no loaded language, just facts, and a quiet footnote at the bottom. Please consider this part of our initial review for potential on-site inquiry. Translation. They weren't just interested, they were coming. I didn't feel triumph, not exactly. It wasn't the kind of thing you celebrate. There's no confetti when the system finally blinks and starts to move. But I felt something like breath for the first time in months. Like I could exhale just a little, then get back to work. I replied that evening with a compressed folder of supplemental logs, including a fresh discrepancy between reported ammonia disposal and actual container shipment records. I attached internal emails that hinted at timeline smoothing by the junior site lead and a quote from the acquired company's former compliance officer, who'd quietly forwarded me a PDF before ghosting into early retirement. That email, no return address, no name, had a single line in the body. If they ask, I wasn't here. 3 days later, a shipment arrived at Alvanik HQ. The front desk thought it was a mistake. No one had ordered anything from DC, and certainly not with that much weight behind it. It was a binder, thick, branded, government seal stamped in foil on the cover like a quiet curse, and on the spine 1 line printed in bold black type. Regulatory Review Case ID 147C. That was the moment I knew we were past the point of no return. I wasn't in the room when Ivy first saw it, but I was in the cafeteria later that day when she strolled in with her usual entourage, someone from brand, the guy from ops who only wore golf shirts, and that new culture lead whose job seemed to be applauding Ivy's every sentence. She laughed, loud enough to carry. "Some audit thing," she said, waving a manicured hand. "We get one of those every quarter. Nothing serious, just government people pretending to be busy." They all chuckled. The guy from ops muttered something about bureaucrats needing hobbies. The culture lead offered to draft a comms plan in case anyone panics. I just kept eating. She didn't notice me. Why would she? Ivy didn't remember the names of people who didn't comment on her posts. To her, I was part of the scenery, a compliance fixture, a chair that emailed occasionally, but I noticed everything. The way her laughter pitched just a hair too high, how her eyes flicked to the hallway every time a phone buzzed, the way she kept flipping her hair, like shaking off the presence of something just behind her. She didn't know it yet, but the regulator hadn't just sent a warning. They'd sent an artifact. The binder wasn't a request, it was a receipt. For everything she ignored, every form she marked drama, every red flag she'd tossed in the shred bin behind her desk while calling it team synergy. And the best part? I hadn't said a single word, not to a soul. The investigation had begun, and I was no longer a whistleblower. I was a reference point. The shift didn't happen all at once. It began with scheduling requests. Oddly polite calendar invites sent to site supervisors and mid-level managers who suddenly stopped returning messages after lunch. I watched it unfold like a silent film in the glass conference rooms. Clipboards, nodding, the occasional stiff laugh from someone trying too hard. Nobody was escorted out, but you could feel the temperature drop with every new name added to the regulatory liaison interview board in the main hall. They hadn't touched me. Not once. Because my name wasn't on a single forged approval, I hadn't signed off on anything. I hadn't submitted a single audit under the new transition policy. I was the ghost in the system, the one person who had flagged the issue, logged the irregularities, and then gone completely silent. To them, I wasn't a threat. I was a reference point. And references don't talk, they just exist, stubborn and unchanging. Ivy, on the other hand, panicked beautifully. The morning after the 5th interview, she called a surprise cross-functional town hall, decked out in her most serious pantsuit, navy, shoulder pads sharp enough to signal emergency mode. She stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows with a latte in one hand and a "we've got this" smile plastered across her face, like a sales banner nobody wanted. "This is a standard compliance conversation," she chirped. "Totally routine. We're working closely with our friends at the agency to provide transparency, integrity, and above all, community confidence." She even clicked through a slide deck titled Operation Clearstream. Clearstream. Like this was a marketing campaign instead of a potential felony. Someone actually clapped. Not many. Just enough to prove that fear makes people stupid. Then she announced her plan to take the lead by personally meeting with the federal team. She called it a gesture of collaborative accountability. 2 hours later, the regulator declined the meeting. The reply was short and unambiguous. "Request denied. We are only meeting with operational personnel directly involved in compliance or safety administration." Translation: not influencers, not daughters, not whatever the hell her job title had become. Ivy's face was blank for a beat too long after reading that email. Then she blamed her assistant, claimed the request was just exploratory, and scheduled an emergency call with the legal team. By that afternoon, the general counsel's door was shut. People started whispering that he'd asked for internal audit logs going back 6 months. Specifically, case closures, approval chains, system access logs tied to whistleblower platform entries. That last one? It froze the blood of anyone who'd seen Case ID 1047C, which, by then, was more people than Ivy realized. Because what she didn't understand, what people like her never understand, is that systems remember, not just servers. People, too. I watched it all unfold from the same beige cubicle I'd occupied for 12 years. No press, no attention. I answered emails, I documented process changes, I flagged a minor vendor discrepancy in the Q4 audit like nothing in the world was burning. Because that's where my power lived now. In the silence, in the void where everyone expected outrage and instead found a ledger, a log. A signature on nothing but fingerprints on everything. They started using the word material lapse in meetings. The CEO canceled a speaking engagement in Munich. 2 site managers quietly updated their LinkedIn headers to seeking new opportunities. And Ivy stopped walking into rooms like she owned them. She hovered, she lingered near conversations she wasn't invited to. She watched her name show up in Outlook chains she used to be CC'd on automatically, and disappear just as fast. It wasn't just a PR problem anymore. It was legal now. And somewhere behind a closed door, the general counsel had just read the name Ivy Carmichael next to a timestamp and a single word in the system. Closed. Drama. That was the turning point, because when legal starts asking who typed what, they're not protecting you anymore. They're preparing the fallout. The boardroom was colder than usual, not because the thermostat was off, because no one was talking. Not really. Sure, there were words. A few hushed exchanges, some half-hearted throat clears, the occasional rustle of paper. But it was the kind of silence that builds around a storm. Dense, pressurized, and full of expectation that someone, anyone, was about to get hit. I stood in the back against the wall, not officially in the meeting, not even really invited. But when legal had requested any personnel involved in the initial compliance routing be present for procedural clarity, I got the calendar hold. No one made eye contact when I walked in. Ivy hadn't even glanced up. She sat third seat from the end, arms crossed, lips drawn so tight they looked surgically sealed. She was dressed like she wanted to be taken seriously. Blazer stiff enough to double as armor, hair pulled so tight I could almost hear the tension from across the room. Her nails still sparkled, though. Old habits. The general counsel stepped up to the head of the table, cleared his throat, and set down a file so thick it gave a quiet thud. That binder was already familiar to me. I'd seen its twin arrive at the front desk weeks earlier. Only this one had post-it sticking out from a dozen angles and 3 red tabs along the side, each labeled in aggressive Sharpie. "I'll make this brief," he said, which is legal code for buckle up. He clicked a remote. The screen behind him lit up with a simple slide. White background, black text, 1 line across the center. Case ID 1047. See, you could see people squinting. A few leaned forward like the font would whisper something if they stared hard enough. "This," he said, "is the backbone of the regulator's inquiry, not just because of what it contains, but because of what it proves." He clicked again. New slide. A screenshot from our internal whistleblower platform, the original submission metadata. My name was redacted, the timestamp wasn't. 3 months ago, a report was submitted internally regarding safety audit falsification. It was marked drama, not actionable. He paused, letting that line breathe. Then he reached into the binder and pulled out a printed copy of the case closure. Ivy's name sat on the bottom, clear as a bell in her favorite font, rounded, confident, full of herself. He held it up. This exact language, this case ID, was used in a report forwarded to the EPA 3 days later. Same content, same reference number, and most importantly, same closure note. He set the page on the table, clicked again. Side-by-side comparison now. One slide showed our internal system. The other, a scanned copy of the EPA's official case file, highlighted in yellow, Case 1047C, originally dismissed internally. You could hear someone suck in air through their teeth. "The regulator's entire position hinges on this point," counsel continued, "that the issue was not overlooked. It was seen, logged, and intentionally dismissed. They're using our own acknowledgement as proof of willful neglect." I didn't blink. I didn't move. I let the words do the work. Ivy shifted in her seat, slow at first, her lips parted, maybe to speak, maybe to object, but no sound came. Her fingers twitched like she was reaching for a defense that had been misplaced somewhere between the group chat and her last LinkedIn post. She looked around. First to the CFO, who suddenly found his notes fascinating, then to the head of ops, who didn't even bother hiding his discomfort. Finally, her eyes landed on her father's empty chair. The CEO hadn't shown. "Let me be perfectly clear," legal said. "They are not alleging a systems failure. They are alleging a governance failure. The case ID is not similar. It's identical, and the closure note is now part of the official evidence binder." He turned to Ivy directly. "We will need a formal statement from you by Friday. Until then, please refrain from further correspondence with regulatory liaisons." It wasn't a suggestion. No one said anything for a full 30 seconds, long enough to feel like an hour. Then the meeting ended. No applause, no dramatic exits, just the slow shuffle of chairs and paper and people pretending they hadn't just watched someone's career bleed out under fluorescent lighting. I stayed until the room emptied. Ivy lingered, still seated, staring at the printed page like it might change if she blinked hard enough. I didn't speak to her. Didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just walked past her, binder still open on the table, and thought, you shouldn't have hit close. Because the system didn't forget. It printed. They called it A transition period, which in corporate speak is just a polite way to say the fall guy has fallen and we're not done counting bodies. First came the memo, circulated company-wide at 6:37 a.m., stamped with the kind of soft font optimism that usually precedes legal firestorms. Effective immediately, Ivy Carmichael has been placed on administrative leave pending further review of procedural discrepancies identified in recent regulatory findings. We remain committed to transparency and operational integrity. No signature, just the word leadership. By noon, the second shoe dropped. David Carmichael, the CEO, was stepping down to focus on his family and pursue personal wellness goals. That last part was a laugh. The man once said sleep was a bad habit invented by weak shareholders. But sure, wellness. I heard he left the boardroom with a migraine and a half-zipped suitcase. The board's formal statement landed by end of day. A breakdown in protocol, a failure of internal escalation. They stopped short of saying anyone lied, but they didn't have to. The silence around it said everything. I didn't celebrate, I didn't clink glasses with the legal team or share pointed memes in Slack. I just cleaned out my desk. It didn't take long. One box, a few manuals, a thumb drive I hadn't plugged in since the early days of the acquisition, a half-dead plant. And at the very top, carefully laid flat against the cardboard, the printed email Ivy sent me all those months ago. Case 147, C, marked drama, not actionable. I'd had it framed. Simple black border, no plaque, just the raw paper, smiley face and all. It wasn't a trophy. It was a reminder of what they tried to bury and how easy it had been for one person to dig it back up. HR stopped by around 3, nervous and sweaty. They tried to make it sound generous. Given your unique institutional knowledge and the current transitional environment, the company would like to offer you a performance-based retention package, quarterly bonuses, increased stock options, and your choice of role realignment. I didn't let them finish the pitch. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I've already filed my exit paperwork. Should be hitting your inbox any minute. Their mouth opened again, trying to pivot, maybe beg a little. I cut that off too. Don't worry, I left notes. Someone will figure out where the files are. And that was it. No drama, no scene. I signed out for the last time at 4:21 p.m. on a Wednesday, same terminal I'd used every day for 12 years. The login screen blinked back to life like it had already forgotten me. I walked past the glass offices where Ivy used to host her mindful mornings, past the oversized poster of David Carmichael shaking hands with a local senator, past the conference room where I watched her read her own obituary in real time and didn't say a word. Outside, the air was cool, unremarkable. I stood there for a second longer than I needed to, then popped the trunk and set the box inside. The framed email slid slightly, but stayed visible. I looked at it and whispered, "Still actionable." Then I drove away. The room was half suits, half sweatshirts, the kind of regulatory summit where ex-CEOs in denial sat next to fresh-faced analysts clutching free tote bags like they contained the future. Government panels, industry breakouts, panelists using phrases like regulatory harmony and ethical disruption, as if the words meant anything. Most people were on their third coffee. The fluorescent lights made everyone look equally guilty. I sat in the back, fourth row from the exit. No badge lanyard, no title card on the folding table, just a notepad I didn't plan to use and a travel mug that still smelled faintly of the compliance office I'd once lived in. The session was titled Whistleblower Compliance, Trends, Triggers, and Thresholds. It sounded dry. It wasn't. A federal analyst, sharp, stone-faced, gray suit with no wrinkle, stepped to the podium and queued up her deck. "Let's look at one case that illustrates the entire spectrum of escalation failure," she said, clicking to the first slide. A title appeared, Case 1047-C, When Ignored Voices Become Litigation. I felt my pulse spike, just once. Then it settled. She walked through the events with surgical calm. An internal report was filed using appropriate protocols. The case was marked non-actionable without documented review. The original filing was later submitted to federal regulators with the company's own reference number. That one choice, using the internal ID, created a straight line from misconduct to governance failure. Slide after slide followed. Timestamps, email headers, audit trails. Ivy's note, blown up to fill the screen, her infamous closer preserved for history. Drama, not actionable. Some people chuckled, Others winced. The analyst didn't flinch. When this image was presented during formal discovery, it changed the tone of the review entirely. What had started as a policy issue became, in legal terms, willful neglect. She advanced to the final slide, a white background, black text, nothing else. Ignoring the right person at the wrong time isn't just arrogance, it's admissible. The room was still. Someone near the front exhaled sharply. Another whispered, "Jesus." I didn't move, didn't nod, didn't smirk. But inside, something settled. Not vindication, not pride, just closure. I thought of Ivy, wherever she was now, of David Carmichael, probably rebranding his exit as executive minimalism, of the people who clapped for them while the rot was setting in. And I thought of that file folder I'd labeled Fallout, and the single choice that changed everything. I didn't yell, I documented, the lights came up. The crowd shuffled toward the coffee table. The analyst stepped down, already onto her next session. I sat for one more beat, watching the words on the screen fade into desktop blue. Then I stood, slid the travel mug into my bag, and walked out, unnoticed, exactly the way I liked it.